Today, I'm excited to welcome Mike Konnert to On the Rocks. On this episode, Mike and I chat about key decision making for mining investors, the industry's need for more entrepreneurs and an entrepreneurial mindset, and the wonders of Topo Chico mineral water from Mexico. Mike is a mining entrepreneur with experience in deal making, financing, and corporate strategy. He's the co-founder and managing director of Inventa Capital, a natural resource investor and incubator with companies worldwide focused on the global shift in energy systems. Mike is also the founder and CEO of Vizsla Silver, a New York-listed company developing projects in the newly consolidated Panuco-Copala district, one of Mexico's highest-grade silver and gold districts. Mike previously co-founded Cobalt One Energy, a cobalt exploration company that he led as CEO and sold to Blackstone Minerals in 2017, and he also holds several board positions. With that, cheers, and let's jump in. Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us here on the Rocks. It's great to have you calling in from Mexico, I know. What are you drinking today?
Well, it's not tequila. It's Topo Chico, which is my favorite mineral water here in Mexico. I can't get it in Canada, so I drink it a lot down here. But I love being in Mexico, and part of that, of course, is the tequila. So if I were drinking tequila, I'd be drinking Tears of Llorena, which is a nice tequila brand. But today is just water.
So you can't get Topo Chico in Canada? They don't carry it?
No.
Really?
They started carrying Topo Chico hard seltzers, though, so you can get, vodka or whatever it is, and soda water in cans, but you can't actually get the soda water.
Oh, funny. It's super popular here in Florida. Like, we buy it at the grocery store, and my husband is a huge fan and basically does mix it with a little bit of tequila and lime and maybe a little bit of jalapeno to make basically his own. We call it ranch water, is kind of how it's marketed here, which is basically, tequila and mineral water with a little bit of flavor. So, I know what to send you next time then. Send you a can.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I'm drinking Rabbit Hole again, so another Kentucky Straight bourbon whiskey, just in case we go down a rabbit hole during this conversation. Preparing. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you on because I think you have such an interesting career and focus in the mining industry and looking at certainly the investment side, but also kind of the combination of entrepreneurship and mining, which I know you and I share a lot of kind of common thoughts on that. So to kick it off, I wanted to kind of ask you to explain a little bit, give us some kind of lessons learned that you've seen in terms of making choices about mining companies and how that plays out in your daily business.
Yeah, so I mean that's basically my job is to make decisions, make choices. How we allocate capital both for Vizsla Silver and how we invest our own money and put our efforts in Inventa Capital into building new companies. So maybe for those that don't know my background, I have a business background. I studied commerce at university, and I got into the capital market side of the mining industry, which is, I didn't really know how much it existed in Vancouver, and I quickly found out, and I quickly fell in love with the investment side of natural resources. So as part of that, I'm the founder and CEO of Vizsla Silver. And Vizsla Silver is a New York stock exchange listed silver company. We're building a very large silver district, mine in a silver district in Sinaloa, Mexico, hence why I'm in Mexico right now. Mm-hmm. And, that was a company that we started basically under the Inventa Capital banner. And the day that we started both Vizsla and Inventa was the day that I completed the sale of a cobalt company that myself and my business partner, Craig Perry, had started about a year before. And our vision with Vizsla was always to build a major mining company essentially out of an asset that we could find that had some sort of exposure to electrification. And then our vision for Inventa has always been to provide the elements that the world needs, which means that we incubate companies, we invest in companies, and as part of that, it's basically decision making all day long. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned from my experience is really that the most important decisions all have to do around people, and decisions can be influenced, but basically strategy and everything all comes down to people and communication. And I've learned the importance of those things, over the last number of years working in the business here.
And where do you see maybe some key decision points when you're looking at a company and how it's evolving? Are there key decision points that are really important as an investor to pay attention to?
Well, one of the most important things I think, and something that we really focus on at Vizsla, is refining the vision that the company has. A lot of times, it's actually amazing how many companies out there exist without a vision or a strategy or objectives or anything. And quickly you can really determine if something's worth an investment or not based on the vision, if there is one at the very least, and if it makes sense as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's if we're looking at investing in, let's say, lithium, which we've just invested in a company there. We need to have a management team that has a vision, and that vision needs to align with our values as well. And without that, there's really kind of little in the way of likelihood of achieving success, I would think.
Do you think that there's a difference between the mining industry and other industries when it comes to that? Maybe less of a focus across the board on vision and strategy?
I do, yeah. I think it's been something that the great companies all do. We know the major mining companies. There's no Agnico Eagle or BHP that exists without a vision or a strategy. Of course, that's something that's important to those types of companies. But I think the junior side, the less developed side, the project side, exploration side, I think it's all been more of a hope and pray strategy for many years. But I think that's changing, because I think it's very clear, for me at least, and I think others in this business, that we're not really in the exploration business. We're in the business of providing the world the elements that it needs to decarbonize, to secure energy, to secure supply chains, to do all these things that have become so important over the last couple of years. It's not just, hey, let's drill a few holes here. It's, do we have a likelihood of success of actually providing the world the things that it needs? And so I think, as the new generation kind of gets into this industry, it's clear that a lot of the other kind of tactics that you might learn in, the tech business or in Silicon Valley, things like that, are starting to be incorporated into our business as well, which I think is great to see.
Yeah, I've always thought it interesting that that in the mining industry, I've asked a few teams in the past, like, tell me your business plan, and every once in a while you get like a total blank stare, right? Like, no, let me tell you about the geology, and I'm like, I get it. I'm a geologist. I love all of that, but it is an interesting difference in the industry with the kind of that's not the expectation to have clarity on that stuff at the junior stage. But I agree with you. I think it's something that's becoming more and more important the more integrated perhaps we are into these other industries, that more of that dialogue is happening earlier rather than like never interacting with the actual consumer of the metal that you produce. I think with the vertical integration, we're going to see a little bit more of that, and the younger generation, as you pointed out.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's an important thing. I was recently, through Inventa, we've invested in and are incubating, and actually this company's had a lot of success so far, but it's a carbon credit company. And our colleagues Valko Britchik and Jamie Keach run that company. And we actually ended up sponsoring an Extreme E electric rally car team with Lewis Hamilton. And they take these cars all around the world and race them and kind of raise awareness for climate change and the natural environment, basically. And I was fortunate enough to go to the final race, where we actually won. Vita Carbon's team won the championship, which was wonderful.
Congrats!
Thank you. I suppose a bit of a brag there, but it all ties into something here.
Yeah.
But we were on this boat, basically, where they it's a functioning workship that takes these cars all around the world, but people and the guests stay on this boat. And it was an incredible group of people. Many billionaires, many kind of very interesting people. And basically the conversation at that level was all about how to decarbonize and how to secure the supply chain, basically secure the metals and minerals and all the aspects that go into decarbonizing. And because these were electric race cars, I feel like that was kind of the, at the forefront of that. But it's so clear to me that, like, if you were to, let's say you had that captive audience, let's say you could get on the stage and say something for us miners, right? And say, hey, we're gonna, give you guys what you need to electrify the world and to decarbonize the world. I think they'd say, well, what's your business plan? And most of them would say, oh,
Yeah.
you got me. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
having pitched a technology company to a lot of VC groups, high net worth individuals, all of that. I mean, like 10% maybe of the discussion is around the technical details, and the rest is about business, right? And I do think that that's really different than what we experience in the mining industry. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and we're going to need to learn that, I think, if we want to attract those different pools of capital, which I think are so important, because there's such a disconnect between reality, as we I suppose reality as we see it, which is these metals are indispensable for what we have, what the governments, what non-governmental groups, but what basically society has all kind of agreed to do, which is decarbonize and electrify the world. And the investors. So what needs to happen, and the people that can provide the capital, I don't think are seen eye to eye. So
Right.
yeah, I think that all has to do around messaging, and that's probably going to be the most important thing going forward.
Yeah, no, and I wonder, do you see any trends in that direction? Are folks repping lithium companies and cobalt companies? Are they catching on a little faster than other commodities, perhaps?
Lithium certainly is, and
Yeah.
I've had some conversations with, and having, it's funny because when I started on the entrepreneurial side, it was around cobalt, and I looked at lithium and I saw the boom which was happening, and I thought, well, this is interesting, but I knew that cobalt was more important basically for the battery makeup. And I think we're almost seeing another, but a bigger wave of this investment into lithium right now. There's many multi-billion-dollar companies that really have kind of sprouted up over the last couple of years, and there's many $500 million to $1 billion market cap companies that are kind of the flavor of the year right now and doing really well. And when I talk to the Bay Street or Wall Street and the people there, they say, well, it doesn't really matter. We just want lithium. And our accounts are saying we want lithium. Everybody wants lithium right now, which I think is great, because it's easy to understand. Well, it's a lithium battery. We need it. Comes out of the ground. Okay, that's pretty simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit harder when we're marketing our company Archer Exploration, which is we just bought the Grasset deposit off of Wallbridge, and we have an incredible team with an excellent vision there, led by Tom Meyer. And it's a little bit harder for people to wrap their minds around nickel sulfide, because it is just that one more step, a little bit more technical, I think, right? But I think this uptake of lithium investments, I think, is helping. It's probably just the beginning in a wave of further investment into these types of metals.
Yeah, hopefully it maybe eases people in a little bit to where, okay, get comfy with lithium, and then you start to dig a little deeper, and maybe it's easier to understand nickel and other minerals after that. Okay, like what is it, like how bacon is like the gateway meat for vegetarians coming back to eating meat. Maybe lithium is our bacon,
That's good.
into the fold.
I hope so. Doesn't taste as good as lithium, though.
True.
Bacon.
Yeah. Lithium samples, don't go there. Yeah,
No.
exactly. Well, and on that, you mentioned, entrepreneurship and what you did with Cobalt. And I know this is something, again, where we don't see a huge amount of what we would consider like traditional entrepreneurship in the mining industry. I would argue like being a junior miner is essentially being an entrepreneur as well. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, what's your experience with being an entrepreneur in the space?
Well, sometimes I do a little bit of soul searching on that. Thinking,
why did I get myself into this?
Well, it's more complex than I think, and maybe this is because there's just been a 10-year bull market in provided by low interest rates, where kind of every crazy idea is getting funded in the tech space and things like that. But And I think as Robert Friedland says, I think it will become the revenge of the miners. So that time is probably over now, and I think it will be our time. But there's so many complexities to operating a business plan in this business, especially if you're public, right? So you have to think about investor sentiment. You have to think about company structure. You have to think about where you're going to find the talent, and basically an industry that's been starved for capital for 2 decades.
Yeah.
People haven't been going into the studying engineering and geology and the numbers that they had historically. So there's so many different challenges that I think it makes it exciting to me. Like I was kind of talking about the soul searching there, but I don't think there's nothing else that I'd want to be doing than working in the space, because it's different every day in a lot of ways. You never know what the market's going to do, and the market tends to dictate a lot of how we operate as well. So we're fortunate with Vizsla because we have access to capital, and we have excellent shareholders that have been very, very supportive. And recently we're able to raise a large amount of money from great shareholders, and in a market where that's been difficult. And I know that because I'm involved in a number of other companies that haven't been getting funding. So
yeah.
So being an entrepreneur in this space, I kind of always was entrepreneurial growing up. I would have little businesses and things that I would do, and a real estate investment when I was really young and things like that. And it was always kind of part of my DNA, I suppose. But in this space, I think it's definitely challenging, and there's so many inputs that you need to be kind of constantly monitoring. But I think that's what makes it fun, and you of course are an entrepreneur in the space as well. I mean, what do you think compared to other industries?
Well, I always tell people that like being an entrepreneur in general, I don't think it's specific to the mining industry, but being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and knitting your parachute on the way down, right? Just like that's that's the reality, right? You've got a great idea, you've got a vision, you got all this stuff. Like you have to take the leap and you have to figure it out, right? And I think what's unique about the mining industry is you've got some really cool technical parts of what goes on. And if you as an entrepreneur can kind of understand where you fit in that space and capitalize on your understanding of the geology, the engineering, the processing, whatever it might be for somebody that's thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, like technical expertise matters a lot, right? The science is important in the mining industry. And I think that that's a great thing. It's not just a space where people can come in and kind of just do marketing and sales. Like you have to really know what you're doing in order to be successful. And I think that's a good thing. I think mining financing and like the traditional ways that the mining industry has funded projects sometimes holds back entrepreneurship in general in the industry, right? It's a very kind of structured process that companies typically go through. The banks and the investors that get behind mining projects have very like through experience have like learned what they're good at investing in and what they want to see. So I think in order to attract that non-traditional capital to the industry and also entrepreneurship in general, we've got to kind of open that up a little bit, right? And I think that relates a lot to technology innovation because there are other industries that are just kicking our butt, right? In a lot of different ways. And we can talk all we want to each other about everybody needs us for the future, but hey, we should be part of the discussions about the future, right? And we're not kind of at the table, I think, because we're kind of stuck in our old ways as an industry, right? I don't think that changes without people coming in and being entrepreneurial. So it's a little chicken or the egg, but that's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? There's these kind of overriding things that do make it a little bit more challenging. Like you said, the traditional ways of financing and the kind of the small pockets of capital that are open to this really, are set in their ways. It's if you don't come with a structure that's typical, if you do something a little bit atypical, it's very hard for the traditional capital providers to participate in new companies. I've noticed that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, I think at some point, the overarching supply demand gap will correct for that, right? I mean, at some point, the kind of bigger world is going to recognize that they need more molecules coming from the
Yeah.
industry, and new money will come in, as I think it kind of has been over the last, year and a half, 2 years. And it'll shake things up a little bit and maybe make the old pools of capital compete a little bit, which I think is really healthy. But I think, it's always important to recognize why those patterns or structures exist, right? They've come to be that way because people were really successful with that method in the past. It doesn't mean that they're bad or wrong. It just may not be everything we need in order to build this huge pipeline of mines that we're going to need to get all this stuff out of the ground for everything that everybody wants, right?
Yeah.
It's not enough there. I mean, you literally can't build all of these mines with kind of the capital that's currently in the market. So where's it going to come from?
That's the big question, and it's so staggering, those numbers. And of course, it's us being in the industry talking about this. I'd love to see this on the front of Time magazine or something like that. But where does the world find the ability and the capital to build all of the copper mines that were built, and the copper that was produced in the last 200 years, and doing that again in the next 20 years? So, it's impossible. It's almost impossible unless the price goes up to incentivize, lower grade operations to go into production. And then if the governments around the world kind of fast track the permitting, because most things take 20 years to permit in a lot of these countries too.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, because prices are not going up the way everybody would love them to. You also don't see money going into exploration the way it needs to, right? To build out the kind of first level of that funnel, because not every deposit we find is going to be a mine, right? And I think that's also what regulators, in particular governments, and even folks on the kind of company consumer side don't understand, that you have to have a really big funnel of potential projects in order to get down to things that actually get built. And while they're starting to invest on kind of the projects that are kind of fairly advanced, when are we going to see those companies invest or provide capital to go into the exploration side? Like, how long will that take?
Yeah.
A while, I think.
It's a little tricky, but for anyone that's listening, that's thinking about coming in and trying their hand at being an entrepreneur, we need more people to try it. So it's worth doing.
Yeah, and that's where I think, again, as you mentioned, the last 2 decades, it's hard because people don't necessarily see huge success stories that would entice somebody to come in and give it a shot, right? And hopefully that's what also comes out of the next few years is getting some big success stories that show people that you can come in and do cool stuff, build great projects, and make money, right? Make money to make it worth it. I mean, that's certainly what I hope we see in the next few years in order to keep people excited. You get people in with that bacon on the lithium. Like, how do we get them excited, like you said, about nickel and copper and all this other stuff once they're in?
Well, I think that can come pretty soon here. If we, oftentimes it's big takeovers that end up putting in cash back in the investors' pockets, and everybody gets excited on finding the next one and the next one and the next one. So I think it's we're certainly closer today than we were yesterday. Every day is closer to that happening, but it's still fun even in these times. I think that are a little bit more difficult.
Now, and if you're looking at entrepreneurship in the industry, what areas do you think we really need to see more of that? Are there specific gaps that you see, or places that you think need more interest, more excitement?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm interested in following is I've mentioned him already here, Robert Friedland, and he's got the iPulse technology.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that BHP just started working with that group, with his group there, on some of these technologies to minimize emissions. And so I thought that was really kind of interesting. I think where we're going to see probably the most innovation, and where entrepreneurs probably make a name for themselves, could be on that innovation around processing, around production, but also exploration. And I think we need to find ways. And I've been chatting with a few guys and gals out of universities that are working on basically technology that helps locate high potential targets for exploration around the world using radar and LiDAR, I should say, and satellite imagery, which I think is quite interesting. If we could minimize the efforts that it takes to find a worthwhile target in exploration, then that's saving a lot of lost sunk capital. Of course, that kills a lot of the quote unquote zombie junior companies on the venture exchanges around the world, but that could be okay. And it probably makes that capital more efficient, which in turn creates a higher return on investment, which probably entices more investors to enter the space. So I think having technological and innovation on exploration all the way through to kind of the whole life of mine, including closure, I think is probably a really interesting place. And one of the things that Inventa's been looking at is how do we foster that and celebrate that. So we're trying to put together a concept that has to do with kind of a challenge, where there'd be rewards and prizes for innovation in the space. And so something that hopefully we can look at doing in 2023.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, clearly, folks that listen to the podcast know I'm super passionate about data, right? And the innovative power of data, and specifically like big data and what you can do with that. And I think some of the cool things you're referencing on the discovery side, right? With sensor integration, I've done a lot of work because of the countries I worked in, like Afghanistan and Libya and across North Africa. We always did as much as we possibly could with satellite and different imagery data to basically narrow down the targets that we wanted to physically go to. That was really driven by cost and risk level, right? I mean, the less time you spend on the ground finding something that's not of interest, I mean, if you can reduce that time on the target, then you've increased the safety and security of your team and reduced your cost. But we did a lot of that too during COVID, like remote exploration planning, basically using stuff like astroimagery to look for spectral signatures, which, I mean, astroimagery is so cheap, right? I mean, and there are a lot of other data packages out there like that, but there's so much that can be done to kind of narrow that list down and identify those targets even before you get to like geophysics and stuff like that. And you still have to send a geo, right? I mean, you still have to have somebody go and take samples and verify that, yes, the analysis is correct. It doesn't get rid of the human, but it does. It reduces the cost, reduces the risk of everything you're doing. And there's so much space for innovation in that. I think you're dead on. And that's a great place for young people to get involved at the university level and start to take a look at it. I just had a really cool meeting with the head of a department here in Florida at FAU, where they're looking at the same sensors, but using it for ocean floor imagery mapping and solving different challenges. But again, same sensors, same data, same zeros and ones, right? But how you interpret it, how you use it, completely different. Why can't we get those kids to also get excited about mining, right? I mean, they're learning the same skills, they're playing around with some of the same problem sets, but they're not paying attention to the mining industry at all as a potential place to work or start a startup or invest as they grow up. So, Mike, I've been asking all my guests, as our listeners know, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the mining industry, what would you change?
I think really, if I could wave a magic wand and change one thing, it's that disconnect between society's perception of what we do versus the reality of how much metal is needed to accomplish our goals. So in other words, it's having everybody aware that mining doesn't just dig in a hole in the ground for profits. It's supplying the world with the elements that it needs. And so I find myself, maybe I'm targeted on CBC or whatever it is, news broadcasting that we have in Canada. And, I sometimes look at comments on things that people post, and there was one that I was reading yesterday about critical minerals. And, all these kind of environmentalists were commenting, how could the government of Canada support mining? We're never going to hit our carbon goals. We're never going to hit these things if we're always mining. As I thought, how is that even possible to miss that step in the logic? We need mines to provide, and why not do them in Canada or countries like Canada or Mexico, United States, where they are regulated. You can't just be dumping fuel and harmful elements into the water streams. It's all done under the watchfly of regulators probably the cleanest mining you can do around the world. And, that it's the best place for it. But, I think really that there is that disconnect between society and people not understanding that anything that wasn't grown was mine, really, that we consume. So that would be my answer to that question.
Yeah, you can't hit your carbon goals if you don't mine more critical minerals, right? Yeah. So absolutely. Well, I'm with you on that. If only we could make one of those magic wands out of some cool mineral, then we'd be all set. Yeah.
Well,
cool.
All hard work, I think, and that's really the way that I think about it, is that there's no reason why we can't do a better job as an industry in explaining those necessary points to people. And I think it's going to take something like someone with a big voice in the world and a big platform to really get that clear to the world. But I think our time is coming, and the supply chain issues that were happening in Europe around this war, COVID, things like that. I think it's opening the eyes of a lot of people. So I think it's coming, but it's just it's our job as an industry to do just a better job communicating the value that we bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know my big push is we need more mining in the movies, right? Movies and TV.
Yeah.
So that's yeah. We need another production company to pick up the message and carry it. So
maybe we should start one. We're talking about entrepreneurship.
Boom. All right. I'll send over the paperwork. We'll start it today. Yeah. No, I really do think that. I mean, it's like every other industry has great, like, essentially product placement in the media. And I just think it's something that we're missing. And we have so many cool stories and cool and weird people. Like, I mean, you could have a lot, a lot of content from the folks that just show up at PDAC every year, right? So, well, thank you so much for coming on, Mike, and enjoy the rest of your time in Mexico. And I'll remember to ship you a few cases of Topo Chico for when you're back in Canada.
Perfect. Appreciate that.